Welcome to the latest Sitting Comfortably podcast. This is Laurel Lindstrom speaking, reading from The Draftsman, my first novel, due for publication with Unbound, apparently now in January because of the awful COVID situation. We've already read the first 3 chapters, and I hope you've listened to them and that you're enjoying the story. In chapter 4, which is called Bigwell, Edwards and Staines, we learn a little bit more about how Martin became so very wealthy. So, are we sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin. Chapter 4 of The Draftsman, Bigwell, Edwards and Staines. After a few days at Shadowhurst, Martin returned in almost junkie-fix desperation to his high-priced London hovel. His journey back had been as anxious as the journey down to the country, even with Joshua at his side, mumbling directions and vaguely waving. But the experience had been marginally less fraught and much shorter than the 106 miles the outbound trip had taken. Joshua dropped Martin off and then went on with the red beast to park it, with an airy promise. "I'll see you later. We'll have stuff to go through, you know." Opening the front door, hands shaking and sweat blistering in the small of his back, Martin leant forwards into a familiar, lusty embrace. Blended with the stink of empty tuna-fish tins and dead Paul Roger bottles was the scent of stale and grubby clothes and semen-stained sheets left long unwashed. Paul Roger because he's once seen a display in an off-licence window and liked the name. Tinned tuna fish because he likes it and always wants it very cold. Cartons of cigarettes in the freezer. Alison makes sure the place is fully stocked whenever she comes up to town, which is often. She empties the overflowing rubbish. Every once in a while she guts the place, sending Martin to stay in a hotel in Putney for a few days. But the journey is too short, too stressful, even with his iPad and My Chemical Romance screaming. So it's rare that he goes along with the hotel plan. It's only because it's up so high that there are no rats. Plenty of other wildlife, including silverfish and cockroaches, are in residence. Recently, carpet beetles, elegant in their black and brown, persistent in their greed, have been working their way through Martin's carpet. He enjoys monitoring their systematic spreading patterns. A soft and slow swarm of familiar and comforting odours reached across the flat's massive open space. Nothing slowed the congregation's lazy progress as it meandered along in the gentle drift of rising and falling air, a muffled, conversational welcome. Apart from the bathroom, Martin's London penthouse flat has no internal walls. There is a kitchenette at one end, the bathroom in one corner, and outside, 2 wide balconies run along the exterior walls, meeting in a right angle. Windows and double doors on each side open out onto the terrace, where there used to be nothing except an edging of old cigarette ends and sludgy black dirt, and the occasional manky feather stuck fast in the grime and grit. And beyond the London skyline, the gleaming stratosphere stretches up in perpetual and boundless salutation, a greeting Martin never used to notice. The unrestricted indoor space of this 160-metre square flat gave Martin a permanently clear view of his space. There was nothing to suspect or hide from, doubt or question. He could see everything in his black and white room unimpeded, and he could see where it ended, where lines met, where curves mirrored and shifted into other shapes and different shapes in black and white. With expansive views of Regent's Park and Marylebone High Street a short stroll away, his flat was probably the largest bedsit in London. But that had never occurred to him. Black jeans and t-shirts hang in the wardrobe, black underwear and socks are in the drawers. Over this black base he overlays occasional curiosities. A heavy knit sweater from Peru. The sumptuous velvet coats. A goatskin waistcoat that reaches down to his knees. And in each of the 6 bedrooms at Shadowhurst is the same collection. Still at the front door, Martin stood quiet, for a moment readjusting, greeting his familiars, calculating, swallowing in the scents and stench, and lit a stale cigarette, pulled from the neglected pack still deep in his pocket. He kicked at the heap of newspapers, leaflets and letters before opening all the windows and the French doors to the terrace. It made little difference to the fog, and the contrast between the stagnant, stinking interior and the London air bouncing wild and alive on the terrace confused him, so he shut the doors and windows again. Shaken by tar-sticky coughs, he stared through the glass at the silenced park, crowded with walkers, runners, people pushing baby buggies, tourists with their silly uniforms of backpacks and cameras and trainers, peering at maps, anxious and confused. He could see their noiseless befuddlement, their curious commitment to being not really lost, but rather stranded and afloat on an endless wave of London's perpetual romance. He saw their shimmering excitement, players on an alien stage where all the props are available and yet barely within reach. He turned his back on all the choices his mind was parading on their behalfs, a gloating richness of options and people they could not grasp and that Martin could not enjoy. Coffee ready, fresh cigarettes from the carton in the freezer, and the heating on with his back to the view as he dumped the post on his desk and sat down. The warmth enhanced the torpid aromas, and Martin, comforted, knew he was in safe and familiar hands. No noise, no static buzz, no complex demands or decisions or efforts to inhabit were required. He set out careful piles of all the printed matter that had arrived while he'd been gone. Newspapers, plastic-covered magazines, junk mail, leaflets, investment statements, bills and demands, gazing blank from window envelopes. Checks he could almost smell. And letters. All were categorized, tidily arranged, neatly aligned. He opened only the letters, and smoothing each one flat, he took a large pair of pinking shears and cut their empty envelopes into perfect halves, one at a time. Each rectangular half, added to a rising pile, was its own collection of sharp right angles, large and small. Martin placed the envelope halves precisely and put the stack to one side at the edge of his desk and started reading through the letters. Mostly, they were related to his work and money, stuff. Occasionally, there was something from Alison or some acquaintance who had got to know him well enough to understand that email and social media didn't work. Those created echoes of static, of noise, so he mostly ignored them. More rectangles, clipped to size and added to the stack. One of the letters he did not ignore or cut up was from his boss, with a P45 and his final salary check. It told Martin Cox how much he was paid, how much tax and national insurance had been deducted, and the balance, and the accompanying note recommended that he talk to Joshua about it. He also wrote that Martin was missed and confirmed that he could have his old desk as requested. "Just let me know when to expect you," the letter said. It was dated a few days earlier, a quick text to Joshua, and it was done. Martin knew that the desk would be in his glass room at Shadowhurst by the time he went back. That desk, his connection, his beginning, his link. An anchor line, reaching behind and ahead to his new, quiet, unmapped life. The desk had been one of the oldest in the place when at 16 Martin Cox had started, first as a clerk and then as a tracer in the offices of Bigwell, Edwards and Staines. His parents had been shocked when he said he wanted to get a job and skip university, but only in that cliched, conventional way that parents of seriously bright children are expected to be. 11 A stars at GCSE and his school pushing him to do the Oxbridge exam. He remembered the excitement when the results came in and his mum's blank face, surprised and slightly confused, as she listened, slightly disengaged, over the washing up to his dad's joy and swelling pride as he read out the results. He was doing it completely at random in his excitement. Physics, A star. Biology, A star. 2 sorts of maths, A star. Both the Englishes, A stars. Economics, A star. Engineering, A star. Politics, A star. Yes! ICT, A star. Design and technology, A*. He was smiling his widest and most sturdy smile, while Martin just stared down at his shoes, leaning on the kitchen counter and pulling his hand through his hair. That's all right then, that's done. He always remembered saying that and thinking it would be enough. Of course, it wasn't. How could it be? He looked up and stared at his father's sun-shining face and knew that it definitely couldn't be enough for him, not even close. He looked at his mother, her slightly tensed eyebrows, the greying lines fraying her face as she coughed and continued, resolute and methodical with the washing up. Maybe it was just enough for her, though he knew she really didn't care as much as his dad did. But he knew she wanted him to stay home for his A-levels, and even when he went to university. He knew he would always stay. He had no choice. On the other side of the room, and sliding further and further away from them, they faded into abstracted versions of themselves, little tiny creatures far, far away from Martin. Martin wondered who he was now. Now he was anonymous and no longer about the 11 GCSE subjects and going for 11's A*. Could she still touch him? Could it still matter when she said, "Here, let me help you with that"? That identity was done with. It wasn't his anymore, except... And the buzz in his head with rising frequency and intensity, a high-pitched and amplifying scream. The GCSEs had been about someone else, someone whose existence was past. They were Alison's, not his. They had been her path, the lesson and the route she had taught their parents. But they should understand that for Martin, this was not about a beginning, it was about an ending. It marked the start of unwritten space before something else that was for Martin, at this moment, unwritable. The study, the brilliance, the expectation, the anxiety, the sense of being owned, were all over. And just as over had to be the fear, the trepidation, the caution. He could no longer see their ordinary world, or the scope of the 11 subjects and fixed routine of school, homework, exams, more homework, more routine, more caution. It was all just someone else's useless furniture, and now it cluttered and clogged his tired and teeming mind. That's the first part of chapter 4. I've hoped you've enjoyed it, and I look forward to reading the next bit. Thank you very much for listening. Have a lovely day. Bye-bye.